I watched CCTV in a government bunker. What I saw wasn't human. The desert was endless and pale, stretching to the horizon like a sea of bone dust. The sky overhead was washed out, bleached by the heat and silence. Jeremy Reyes squinted through his car's cracked windshield, wondering for the fifth time if he'd taken a wrong turn. There was no signage, no fencing, no towers, just a squat concrete cube sunk into the sand, half buried by wind and time. Facility 39B. He double-checked the coordinates on his phone. No signal. Of course. The metal door opened before he could knock, groaning on rusted hinges. A man in a grey uniform with no insignia waved him inside without a word. The temperature dropped instantly, from scorching heat to bone-deep chill. Jeremy followed, boots echoing on the metal grate flooring as they descended a narrow shaft lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. No windows. No sound except the hum of unseen machinery. They passed sealed doors labeled by level. L2, L3, L4, all the way down to L11. The elevator stopped there. Jeremy noted the missing floor. No L12. But he remembered the classified line in his contract: do not inquire about sublevel 12 under any circumstance. It sounded dramatic at the time, like something from a spy movie. Now, here in the stale, recycled air, it felt less like fiction and more like a warning written by someone who didn't survive long enough to explain it. The security briefing was brief and cold. He was told his post was Surveillance Wing D nights only. 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Double pay. Unlimited energy drinks. No internet. No personal phones. The camera feeds were analog, and that was intentional. Digital systems are too easy to tamper with, the supervisor had said, without elaboration. He was given a metal badge, a laminated rule card, and a plastic access key. That was it. The surveillance room itself was a cave of screens, rows upon rows of glowing monitors stacked like a control center from the 1970s. The chairs squeaked. The air reeked of coffee and ozone. On screen, Jeremy saw stairwells, white corridors, gray dormitories, chemical storage units, loading bays, each camera labeled by number and level. Over 400 feeds blinked at him, most eerily still. The laminated card had only 3 rules printed in large black font. Do not rewind any footage. Do not engage in conversation with the other guard. If any screen blacks out and returns with static forming a face, initiate Command Blue immediately. Jeremy had laughed when he first read them. It all felt like a weird joke, a hazing ritual. Maybe the last guy made the rules as a prank. He asked his supervisor about them. The man stared at him for a moment too long, then simply said, "Just follow the rules. Especially number 3. Then left. Now alone in the dim glow of monitors, Jeremy sat down and stared at the endless grid of flickering images. Desert wind outside. Silence inside. No faces. No rewinds. No talking. Easy money. He cracked open his first energy drink and watched. Here is section 2. The other watcher fully expanded to around 600 words. Jeremy quickly learned that he wasn't the only night shift operator. On his second night, as he entered the surveillance chamber balancing 2 cups of coffee and a clipboard he hadn't touched since onboarding, he noticed another figure already seated in the far corner, motionless, almost blending into the darkness. Arnold. He hadn't heard him enter. No footsteps. No elevator hum. He was just there. Older, mid-50s, maybe older, but it was hard to tell under the yellowish monitor light. His skin looked thin, stretched, like he hadn't been outside in months. Blue veins mapped his arms like rivers under wax paper. His eyes twitched constantly, scanning his monitors in sharp, bird-like flicks. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Jeremy approached casually, trying to offer one of the coffees. "Hey, man. Figured we could use the caffeine, right? Thought maybe." Arnold didn't look at him, didn't move, didn't blink. Jeremy tried again, slower. "Coffee." Arnold turned then, not to take the cup, but to look directly into Jeremy's face. His eyes were glassy, bloodshot, rimmed with purple like bruises. "Don't stare too long," he said quietly. His voice was raspy, hoarse. "It stares back." Jeremy held still for a moment, trying to process whether that was sarcasm or a warning. Arnold went back to his monitors, muttering under his breath. Jeremy caught bits of it, something about mirrored corridors and the ones behind the glass. The rest was gibberish. The awkwardness hung in the air like a bad smell. Jeremy placed the coffee on a crate nearby and returned to his own desk. He stole glances at Arnold from time to time, watching how the man operated. Calmly, precisely, but never blinking for too long. Never rewinding. Always whispering. The hours dragged. Around 3:11 a.m., just as Jeremy was starting to doze off, Arnold stood abruptly, powered down his console, and walked toward the exit. He didn't say goodbye, didn't even glance over. The next night, the same thing happened. And the night after that, Jeremy started setting his watch by it. 3:11 a.m., exactly. Like clockwork. It was weird, sure, but maybe that was just Arnold's thing. Some people had bedtime routines. Jeremy chalked it up to superstition or burnout. Maybe the guy was just dealing with the psychological strain of graveyard shifts underground. Then, on night 5, something changed. It was around 2:47 a.m. Jeremy was flipping lazily through the feeds, eating stale pretzels and counting how many cameras hadn't updated in over an hour. That's when he saw the flicker. Just a quick, almost imperceptible glitch. One feed, CAM 451, blinked to static for half a second, then snapped back. But the corridor it showed looked wrong. Twisted. Not in the lens distortion kind of way, but physically, like the hallway itself had warped inward slightly, like a funhouse mirror had been stretched through the concrete. He checked the label. Level 12. Jeremy froze. There was no level 12 on the floor plan. No elevator access. No maintenance logs. Level 11 was the bottom. He had checked the schematic himself on his first day. He stared at the screen. The corridor was still. Fluorescent lights flickered at uneven intervals. Nothing moved. Yet he felt watched. He called out without thinking, "Arnold. Hey, you seeing this?" No reply. Jeremy turned. Arnold was already gone. The clock read 3:12 a.m. Jeremy checked the feed again. The hallway had returned to normal, or maybe it never changed. He wasn't sure. But for the first time, a chill crept down his spine that had nothing to do with the recycled air. He looked at the untouched coffee cup still sitting on the crate. And suddenly, the rules didn't feel like a joke anymore. Here is Section 3, Night 1, Blurred Things, expanded to approximately 600 words. Jeremy never thought silence could be so loud. With Arnold gone, vanishing once again at 3:11 sharp, the surveillance room felt hollow. The mechanical hum of the old CRT monitors, the soft click of a cooling fan somewhere behind the desk, even his own breathing sounded intrusive. He tried to keep himself distracted, cycling through the dozens of feeds that blinked across the wall of screens. Most of them were painfully dull. Dormitories with snoring guards. Supply hallways lined with industrial barrels. Empty stairwells, unmoving except for the occasional flicker of a motion-sensing light. Somewhere in level 5, a technician dropped a wrench and muttered a curse. Jeremy watched him retrieve it in real time, feeling like a voyeur in a labyrinth of boredom. Still, he didn't mind. The monotony was strangely comforting. Nothing supernatural. No cursed cameras. No faces in the static. Just an underground bunker filled with nothing much at all. That illusion shattered at 3:28 a.m. Feed CAM 12X lit up. It hadn't been active before, not once in the past week of observation. He remembered it specifically because it had always shown a black screen with the system code signal not available. Now it flickered on in a burst of digital snow, then settled into a strange corridor. The hallway on screen was unmistakably wrong. It was shaped like a normal concrete corridor at first glance. Fluorescent lighting above, steel-reinforced walls, the usual, but the perspective twisted slightly, unnaturally. The walls curved subtly inward, the floor seemed to slope up at both ends, and the far door was too tall. Way too tall. 7 feet? 8? No sound. No movement. Just that unnerving angle. He leaned forward, squinting at the grainy footage. There was something off with the shadows. They didn't follow the light correctly. Jeremy clicked the report button on his terminal, tagging CAM-12X for visual anomaly, and waited. No response. Usually, someone from operations control would ping him back within seconds for flagged footage. Not tonight. He tapped the MIC surveillance wing D to OC CAM-12X just activated. You guys seeing this? Still nothing. His eyes drifted back to the screen. The feed glitched again, a single sharp pulse of static, then returned. His fingers hovered over the controls. Don't rewind any footage. That was rule 1. The biggest, boldest rule on the laminated card. But maybe this was a glitch, right? What if the feed activated late and he missed something? Just 5 seconds. 5 seconds wouldn't hurt. He dragged the cursor back 10. The moment he clicked rewind, all the monitors dimmed for half a second. The lights in the room seemed to pulse with them. The feed stuttered, jumped, then froze on a blurred image. Jeremy froze too. In that split-second frame, something was visible, something tall. Not a person. Not quite. Its body was impossibly elongated, stretched thin like it had been pulled through a screen mesh. The head was slightly tilted, and instead of a face, there was a texture. Like noise, like VHS static compressed into flesh. It wasn't in the hallway. It was in the lens. The figure vanished just as quickly as it had appeared. All the screens blinked white, then black. Jeremy jerked back in his chair, breath caught in his throat. A ringing sound pierced the air, an internal line coming through. He picked it up with a trembling hand. The voice on the other end wasn't human. Or at least, it wasn't trying to sound human. It was robotic, processed, like something mimicking the cadence of speech without understanding it. Do not rewind level 12. Not for you. Then silence. Click. The line went dead. The screens returned to normal. CAM-12X now displayed signal not available again. Jeremy stared at it, pulse pounding, suddenly aware of the sweat collecting on the back of his neck. He didn't touch the rewind button again. Here is Section 4, Red Corridor Protocol, expanded to approximately 600 words. The next night began like the others, quiet, still, and heavy with the kind of silence that made every click of Jeremy's keyboard sound like a thunderclap. He came in early this time, sipping cheap vending machine coffee, pretending yesterday hadn't happened. CAM-12X still read signal not available, and part of him hoped it would stay that way forever. Arnold hadn't arrived yet. Or maybe he had, and Jeremy just hadn't noticed. The man had a talent for appearing and vanishing like vapor. Jeremy settled into his chair and began another mindless sweep of the feeds. L5, storage crates. L7, 2 janitors mopping opposite ends of the same hallway, never acknowledging each other. L3, cafeteria. Empty tables. A flickering vending machine. Then something new. CAM-0137. He frowned. That feed had always shown the server wing, a long row of metal cabinets under pale light. But tonight, it displayed something else. A corridor, long and narrow, bathed entirely in red. Emergency lighting flooded the scene, painting everything in a deep, pulsing crimson. The walls were slick with condensation, or something thicker. The camera itself seemed fogged from within. At the end of the hallway, a door sat slightly ajar, rocking gently on its hinges. Jeremy leaned in. Where the hell is this? As if on cue, a figure entered the frame. A man in a hazmat suit. Yellow, bulky, with a full-face visor. No ID badge. No department patch. He walked unsteadily, like something was wrong with his legs, as if he was being pushed forward, not walking of his own accord. One arm hung limp. His head twitched slightly to the left, as if listening for something just out of frame. Jeremy reached for the radio. Surveillance D to OC. I've got a man in unknown section. CAM-137. Red corridor. Do we have a protocol for? The man stopped, then turned to the camera. Even through the visor, Jeremy could see the foggy outline of a twisted face pressed to the glass from the inside. Something was wrong with his jaw. It jutted out and downward, dislocated and trembling. Then, slowly, he raised both hands and began clawing at the lens. Not toward it, from within it. Jeremy froze as deep scratches echoed through the surveillance room speakers. Static bled into adjacent monitors. SEM 137 pulsed, then began to blur around the edges as if being erased in real time. Then all the other screens began to flash. One by one, feeds started flickering red. Cam 021, Cam 154, Cam 409, all blinking red in sync. And that's when Arnold burst through the door. "Back away from the console," he barked. Jeremy barely moved before Arnold slapped his hand off the keyboard. The older man's eyes were wide, and for the first time, Jeremy saw real fear behind them. Arnold yanked a panel loose from the underside of the main terminal and hit a hidden switch. A dull thunk echoed from the control system. The CAM 137 feed went black. Then the word "purged" appeared in bold white letters across the screen. All the other flickering feeds steadied. Silence returned. Jeremy looked up, shaken. What the hell was that? Who was that guy? Arnold stared at the now blank monitor for a long beat, his breathing shallow. "They are starting early," he muttered. "Who?" Jeremy asked. "What are you talking about?" Arnold didn't answer right away. His lips barely moved as he spoke the next words like a riddle he didn't expect Jeremy to understand. "Not who," he said. "When?" And then he walked away, leaving Jeremy in the cold blue glow of the screens, alone again, except for the echo of scratching still ringing in his ears. Here is Section 5, Feed 132, the mirror loop, expanded to approximately 700 words. Jeremy wasn't sure when he first noticed Feed 132 looping. It was sometime past 2 a.m., during that part of the shift where everything blurred together. The hum of the machines, the soft buzz of fluorescent light, the fatigue pressing down on his shoulders like sandbags. He had half a stale protein bar in one hand, a pen in the other, and his eyes bounced lazily across the screens until one of them, Feed 132, caught and held his attention. The hallway it showed was one of the main access corridors on level 4. Familiar, ordinary, brightly lit. A metal bench on one side, 2 closed lab doors on the other. The kind of place you could walk through 100 times without ever remembering. But something was off. The feed had started to loop. A man, tall, in a grey technician's uniform, walked from left to right across the hallway. He paused halfway, turned to glance at the camera, then continued on out of frame. 10 seconds later, it happened again. The same walk, the same pause, the same glance. Jeremy leaned forward, blinking hard. Maybe the footage had glitched. Or maybe someone was testing an archived playback without tagging the feed. He checked the live indicator. Still green. Still labeled live. Third loop. Fourth. In each pass, the man repeated his movements perfectly. But in the fifth loop, something changed. Subtle. Quick. When the man turned toward the camera, his face shifted. Not like a trick of the light. No. His jaw unhinged. Quickly, grotesquely. A line opened vertically down the center of his face like a zipper splitting flesh. It happened in a single frame, then reset. Jeremy's breath caught in his throat. The sixth loop began. This time, the man didn't appear in the hallway. Instead, he was standing behind Jeremy, in the surveillance room itself, visible only in the corner of the Feed 132 screen. The camera angle hadn't changed, and yet there was the figure. Standing motionless behind Jeremy's chair, his grey uniform darkened with what looked like smears of something wet. His face was still split, but now the crack ran higher, up past his brow, like his skull was opening. Jeremy whirled around in his chair. Nothing. No one behind him. He turned back. The feed was still mid-loop. The figure still there. He looked down, trying to catch his breath, but the sound wasn't his own. It was the sound of his own voice echoing from the speakers, warped and delayed. Then the seventh loop began. And this time, it wasn't the man at all. It was Jeremy. On the screen, future Jeremy sat at the console, pale and trembling. His eyes were wide with horror, and blood was running down his forehead and dripping across the monitor glass in thick rivulets. He was trying to scream, mouth wide open, chest heaving, but no sound came out. The loop played this over and over. 10 seconds. Future Jeremy screaming silently, bloody hands clawing at the glass. Jeremy scrambled from his seat, yanked the power cord from the monitor. The screen should have gone black. It didn't. Feed 132 remained lit, unaffected by the disconnection. The loop played again. And this time, future Jeremy looked directly at him. Not the camera, him. Jeremy backed away slowly, heart pounding, a metallic taste rising in his mouth. What the hell was he looking at? It wasn't a recording. It wasn't real time. It was something else. Then he noticed the timestamp. The loop had stopped counting up. It was counting down. He watched it tick. 00:01:57. 00:01:56. 2 minutes. He looked at the console. The current time matched the countdown. Feed 132 wasn't showing the past. It was showing what was about to happen. Jeremy stumbled forward and began yanking cables, pulling breakers, trying to kill the signal, but the feed held steady. The figure of himself on the screen continued to bleed, continued to scream, continued to beg for something Jeremy couldn't hear. He gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. He had just under 2 minutes to stop whatever was coming, or to become the thing already staring at him from the screen. Here is Section 6, Incident Log, the Whisper Room, expanded to approximately 600 words. Jeremy found the hard drive by accident. He wasn't looking for anything, just trying to keep his hands busy, keep his mind off the countdown that haunted him every time he looked at feed 132. The room felt colder since that night. The lights buzzed louder. The static on the feeds seemed to linger longer. It was during a routine sweep of the filing drawers beneath the main console that he noticed the panel was slightly loose. Behind it, duct-taped to the metal wall, was a dusty external drive, its label nearly peeled away. Only a few words remained legible, written in faded red ink. Incident Log 7A, the Whisper Room. He hesitated. The name alone was enough to raise every hair on his arms. But curiosity won, as it always did. He plugged it into a secure terminal on a disconnected rig, one that didn't feed directly into the surveillance network. The drive booted slowly. A single folder. One file. 7a_serve_archive_L12.mov. He clicked it. Static. Then black and white grainy footage. 3 guards appeared, all in full tactical gear. Jeremy recognized the corridor immediately, Level 11's decontamination zone. They were preparing to breach a sealed security door, prying it open with crowbars and electric cutters. Behind them, red lights strobed. The word lockdown pulsed across the walls in stenciled lettering. The camera timestamp jumped. Now the men were stepping into the unknown. Level 12. The footage dimmed as they passed the threshold. The hallway beyond was strange, lined with mirrors on either side, but the reflections didn't sync up. One guard walked forward, but his mirrored self remained still for an extra second. Another reflection grinned too wide. None of the men seemed to notice. They continued onward into darkness. The sound came in next. A low hum, then whispering. Jeremy leaned closer to the speaker. The whispers were barely audible at first. Muted, like they were being spoken through glass. But slowly, they grew louder, clearer, overlapping voices, urgent and wet. Behind the glass, beneath the skin. The guards paused. One of them turned back toward the camera, his expression unreadable behind his visor. Another timestamp jump. Now the footage showed only one man remaining. He stood in the center of a featureless mirrored room. The others were gone. No sound of struggle, no screams, just gone. He was trembling, breathing hard. The whispers were deafening now. Look, look, look. Then the man raised his hands to his helmet and began to undo the straps. Jeremy leaned back in alarm. Don't. What are you doing? On screen, the guard removed his helmet. His face was blank, calm, unblinking. Then, with no warning, He dug his fingers into his own cheeks and tore downward. Skin peeling away like paper, bone cracking open with the sound of snapping branches. Jeremy recoiled. Blood soaked the mirrored floor, but beneath the shredded skin was another face. Smiling. Still. Wide-eyed. Not human. It blinked directly into the camera, and the feed cut to black. Jeremy sat frozen, heart pounding. "You shouldn't be watching that." The voice came from behind. He jumped, turning to see Arnold standing in the doorway, face pale as ever, eyes hard. "You weren't here," Jeremy said, breathless. Arnold stepped closer, gaze fixed on the monitor. "That's how it spreads," he said quietly. "Through footage. Through eyes." Jeremy looked at the black screen. "You mean it can infect people? Just by watching?" Arnold didn't answer. He didn't need to. The whisper still echoed faintly in the speakers, though the file was long closed. Behind the glass, beneath the skin. Here is Section 7, Forbidden Feed, Project Siren, expanded to approximately 600 words. Jeremy wasn't supposed to access the restricted feeds. He'd known that from day one. Dozens of directories were locked behind clearance tiers he didn't have, files marked with red sigils, passwords that required biometric verification, even a few that simply didn't respond when clicked, as if the machine refused to acknowledge their existence. But the more time he spent down there, the more he began to notice patterns, subtle anomalies buried in the code, invisible shortcuts between directories, hidden pathways. If you understood the system like Jeremy did, and knew how to break a few rules, you could force the console to show you things you weren't meant to see. That's how he found it. A single camera feed buried in a folder labeled Project Siren, Biochem. No floor assignment. No access date. Just a dead connection flickering faintly in the corner of the control grid. He hesitated for a full minute, cursor hovering over the button. Then he clicked. The screen buzzed to life. At first, all he could see was fog, a pale mist covering the lens, dense and slow-moving. Then the focus cleared, and Jeremy saw the chamber. It wasn't like the rest of the facility. The walls were curved, layered in what looked like steel and black ceramic. In the center stood a massive cylindrical tank filled with blue coolant, vents hissing softly around it. Inside the tank was a figure, humanoid, motionless, suspended in the fluid, but not human. The creature was featureless, smooth, pale skin stretched tightly over a thin, long-limbed frame. No visible eyes, mouth, or ears. Its head was slightly too large, bulbous and domed. Thin arms floated at its sides, fingers long enough to drag against its knees. Something about its proportions was deeply wrong, like it had been shaped by memory, not biology. Jeremy couldn't breathe. He leaned closer. The creature didn't move. The only thing alive in the room was the low rumble of containment systems. Then, the feed began to shake. Not just a camera glitch. The room itself was trembling, ever so slightly. A pressure built in Jeremy's ears, like he was too close to a subwoofer. Static lined the edges of the monitor. On screen, the cryo tank hissed once, then cracked. A jagged fracture appeared across the surface of the glass. Jeremy flinched. As he recoiled from the screen, his eyes caught something in the reflection. His own face in the CCTV glass. Except, it wasn't moving with him. His reflection blinked, twice, out of sync with his own eyes. Then smiled. He stared, frozen. The screen flashed violently white, and new words appeared in a bold, stenciled font. Subject awake. Then a shrieking alarm filled the surveillance room. Red lights began to rotate in the ceiling. The sound wasn't the usual mechanical tone of a fire drill or lockdown. It was organic, like metal grinding against bone. Jeremy backed away from the monitor, chest heaving. A voice crackled across the facility's speaker grid. All personnel, initiate lockdown protocol Gamma. Unauthorized breach in containment sector Siren. Seal all corridors. Avoid direct visual contact. Footsteps pounded into the surveillance room. Arnold burst through the door, wild-eyed and holding a short-barreled rifle Jeremy didn't know he had access to. "What did you open?" Arnold barked. It was a feed," Jeremy stammered, pointing at the screen. It looked at me. I saw. It blinked. Arnold froze. You made eye contact, he said, the color draining from his face. It knows you now. The alarms kept screaming. Arnold chambered around. We need to move. Here is Section 8, Nightfall Breach, No Exit, expanded to approximately 700 words. The lights died without warning. A sharp click, then darkness fell across the surveillance room like a blanket dropped from above. For a few seconds, there was nothing, no screens, no hum of the consoles, not even the whine of the fluorescent bulbs. Just silence, thick and complete. Then came the low hum of backup power kicking in. Dim red strips lit along the walls. The monitors stuttered, one by one, trying to come back to life. Half of them didn't. The other half showed only static. Jeremy stood slowly, heart pounding. The air had changed, thicker, heavier, as if the oxygen itself had curdled. He tried the terminal's comm switch. Dead. Then the console keypad. No response. Everything was locked. He reached for the emergency phone and slammed the receiver to his ear. Silence. A sharp beep made him jump. A new camera feed had just gone live. Not one he recognized. The label read, CAM000. It hadn't existed before. None of the feeds started at 0. Jeremy stared at the screen as it resolved itself into an image. The camera showed the surveillance room, but not as it looked now. The lighting was colder, sharper. Jeremy's desk was there. His chair. The coffee cup he'd knocked over earlier. All of it the same, yet off. And in the chair, slumped forward, was him. Jeremy. Dead. Blood pooled around the console, soaking the keyboard. His eyes were wide open, staring directly at the screen. His lips had been torn open at the corners in a jagged mockery of a smile. Something had written symbols across his forehead in what looked like ash or dried ink. One hand was missing. The timestamp read, +00:17:34. 17 minutes into the future. Jeremy stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. The feed blinked, then zoomed closer on its own. Onto his face. Onto his dead, open eyes. No, 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 he whispered, shoving the monitor back from his desk. He spun toward the elevator, heart in his throat. His fingers hit the override key and slammed the call button. Nothing. The digital display above the door read, error. Floor locked. He backed away, panting. From down the hall came the sound of something moving. Not walking. Gliding. The nearest hallway cam, still partially functional, blinked to life. Jeremy ran to it, eyes locked on the screen. And there it was. Something massive, spider-like in motion but walking upright on elongated limbs, gliding just outside the surveillance wing. Its body was segmented, joints clicking with each movement, and its head hung low like it was too heavy for its neck. There were no eyes, no face, just a smooth expanse of flesh stretching over its skull like plastic wrap pulled too tight. As it moved, its limbs seemed to fold the wrong way. Jeremy felt bile rise in his throat. The thing paused, sniffing the air. Then it turned toward the camera. And smiled. There was no mouth, but the skin split slowly, vertical and silent, like a wound opening in anticipation. Jeremy tore himself from the screen and grabbed the flashlight from the emergency locker. He had to find Arnold. He had to be alive. He had to know what to do. Jeremy ran, boots echoing through the dimly lit corridors. The red emergency strips barely lit the path, just enough to show the way, but not enough to chase away the shadows. He reached Arnold's bunk station, far past the security wing. The door was ajar. Inside, it was silent. The flashlight beam swept across the room and froze on something in the corner. Arnold's body, or what was left of it. His limbs were twisted at impossible angles, like someone had tried to fold him into a suitcase. His spine arched backward, and his neck was turned a full 180 degrees. The skin around his eyes had been ripped out, cleanly, surgically. Hollow sockets stared at the ceiling. He had no expression, no pain, just emptiness. Jeremy staggered back, horrified, and that's when he saw the writing on the wall behind the body. Thick letters, smeared in blood. "You shouldn't have looked." Jeremy's light flickered, and somewhere behind him, something scraped against the concrete. Close. Here is Section 9, the escape protocol, expanded to approximately 600 words. Jeremy had one last option. He stumbled back into the surveillance room, panting, slick with sweat and terror. The walls seemed to pulse with the red glow of the backup lights. Every shadow felt alive. Every corridor feed now displayed either static or that awful, flickering CM000, the one showing his own dead body, still slumped at the desk, closer each time. He remembered the emergency code. Blue override. Arnold had mentioned it once, in a half-asleep daze. If you hear the glass whisper, and the static won't stop, hit blue override. It's the only door that opens downward. Jeremy's hand hovered over the buried console buttons, then entered the command. BLUE-OVR 217. The screen blinked once. Then, with a deep rumble, something shifted behind the wall of monitors. The center panel rotated inward. A door, curved, seamless, opened with a hiss, revealing a narrow metal staircase that led down into blackness. No lights, no markings, just cold air rising from below like a breath from something asleep for far too long. Jeremy hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. Every part of him screamed to turn back. But where could he go? The elevators were dead. The exits sealed. Whatever was hunting him knew his name, knew his face. He descended. The stairwell spiraled downward farther than it should have. Farther than the 11 levels he knew about. There were no signs, no numbers, no doors along the way. Just darkness and mirrors. Yes, mirrors. They began appearing on the walls halfway down. Smooth, wall-sized panels of black glass reflecting dim outlines in the dark. But not quite right. Not exactly mirroring his steps. His reflection lagged behind. Jeremy stopped. The reflection didn't. It took one more step, then smiled. He reached the bottom. Sub-level 12. No cameras. No screens. Only mirrors lining every surface. Floor, ceiling, walls. The space felt infinite, like he was walking into a maze made of glass and breath. At the center was a large cylindrical tank, just like the one from the siren feed. But it was empty. The fluid had drained. The cryo seals were broken. The thick glass walls were covered in handprints, some large, some disturbingly small, all smeared outward. Jeremy stepped closer, drawn despite himself. He glanced at the mirror directly across from the tank. His reflection was already there, waiting. It didn't move when he did. It just stared. Then, slowly, it tilted its head. Jeremy blinked. Sweat poured into his eyes. The ceiling speakers crackled to life with a burst of distortion. Then a voice, calm, cold, mechanical. "You are now the Watcher." Every mirror shimmered. And then, in the doorway behind him, footsteps. Not many, just one pair. Jeremy turned slowly, and saw himself, but older, smiling too wide. Eyes glassy, movements slightly off, as if every limb was being pulled by invisible strings. The figure stepped forward, arms open. Jeremy backed away, stumbled. Every mirror now reflected a different version of him. Some screaming, some crying, some staring blankly with eyes gouged out or jaws missing. And the tank, empty only seconds ago, now showed something shifting inside it. Something human-shaped, but made entirely of reflections. Jeremy turned to run. The door was gone. The light overhead flickered once. Then darkness fell like a curtain. Here is Section 10, Epilogue, The New Recruit, expanded to approximately 500 words. Weeks passed. The desert winds continued to scream across the dunes above Facility 39B, but nothing moved on the surface. The squat concrete entrance remained hidden beneath a fresh skin of sand. There were no signs, no noise, just the hush of silence guarding something deep and breathing far below. Zara Yasaf arrived just before midnight, escorted by a silent guard in a nondescript uniform. No badge, no name, She asked questions on the elevator ride down. Got nothing in return. 11 levels beneath the world. The doors opened with a hiss, revealing the surveillance chamber. She blinked at the rows of vintage monitors stacked like an altar. Each screen hummed softly. Most showed nothing but sterile corridors and locked doors. A few glitched occasionally, just flickers, hardly noticeable. A laminated card lay on the desk, weighted by a plastic coffee cup. Welcome to Surveillance Wing D. Printed in bold black text. Do not rewind footage. Do not speak to the other operator. Do not look at CAM 132 for longer than 10 seconds. No signature. No explanation. Zara smirked. They really go for the creepy atmosphere, huh? There was no response. The room was empty. No supervisor in sight. No second chair. Just the drone of machines and the soft hum of electricity. She settled into her seat and tapped a few keys, familiarizing herself with the feed layout. Most cameras were boring. Janitors mopping floors, a technician sneezing in a hallway, crates stacked in L7. Then her eyes drifted to SEM 132. Just for a second. It showed a dim hallway, walls slightly too narrow. The lighting flickered once. No movement. No people. Then, a shape in the far distance. Too blurry to make out. Zara leaned in, squinting. Is that? The figure stepped forward. A man, dressed in an old Facility 39B uniform. He stopped halfway down the corridor and smiled. Too wide. Zara's hand twitched toward the keyboard, instinctively hovering over the playback controls. Then stopped. Rule 1. Her heart beat a little faster. She turned to look behind her, as if someone might be watching. The room was still empty, but when she looked back at the monitor, the man on SEM 132 was now staring directly at her. Not at the camera. At her. Her breath caught. The screen flickered, then blacked out. All monitors blinked once. When they returned, everything looked normal again. Routine footage. Quiet halls. Except now, a new feed had activated in the upper right corner. One she hadn't noticed before. Cam Junior 132. She clicked it. It showed the surveillance room. This room. Her. On screen, her reflection leaned forward slightly. Zara blinked. Her reflection didn't. Then the reflection smiled. And didn't stop.